I had the perfect man and the perfect ring, but I destroyed everything with one stupid phone call to my mother because I couldn't keep my big mouth shut for even one single day like I promised. Hey there, I'm Abigail. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I was looking for gum in William's jacket pocket because he always keeps those little mint packs in there, and I just brushed my teeth but wanted something fresh before bed. My fingers hit something hard and square instead. Not gum. I pulled out a small velvet box and my heart stopped. Navy blue, just like his jacket. What was this doing here? My hand started shaking before I even opened it, because deep down I already knew what it had to be. The box creaked open, and there it was. The most perfect engagement ring I'd ever seen. Round diamond, not huge, but so brilliant it caught the light from our kitchen fixture, set in this delicate gold band that looked like it was made specifically for my finger. How did he know exactly what I would want? We talked about marriage in those lazy Sunday morning conversations, but never about rings, never about specifics. I stood there gaping at it like an idiot. This was real. William was going to propose to me. The man who made me coffee every morning, who knew I liked my toast barely golden, who still held my hand when we walked down the street after 3 years together, he bought me a ring. His key turned in the lock and panic shot through me. Should I shove it back in his pocket? Pretend this never happened? But my feet wouldn't move, and when he walked through the door I was standing there holding the open ring box like I'd been caught stealing. His face fell and I felt horrible. The disappointment was written all over him, and I started babbling apologies about looking for gum and finding this instead and ruining everything. But then his expression changed completely. The disappointment melted into this soft, tender smile I'd never seen before. He walked over, took the box from my trembling hands, and we just looked at the ring together. We stood there in our little apartment entryway, and it felt like the most perfect moment of my entire life. Just us. Just this quiet joy between two people who'd found each other. He explained he'd been planning something special for the actual proposal and asked me to keep this discovery secret so we could still have our moment. I promised through happy tears that I would. This was our secret, our beginning. But secrets have a way of burning holes in your chest when you're too excited to contain them. The second William left for work the next morning, I called my mom. I couldn't help myself. The excitement was bubbling up inside me like champagne that had been shaken too hard, and I had to share it with someone who'd understand how monumental this was. When she answered, I immediately switched to video chat and held up the ring box, practically bouncing. My mother's reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of the squealing and happy tears I'd imagined, she got this weird, analytical look on her face. She studied the ring through the phone screen like she was appraising it at a jewelry store. The silence stretched on forever. When she finally spoke, her tone was measured and careful. She called it nice and classic, which should have sounded like praise but somehow didn't. Then came the comment that made my stomach drop. She mentioned the stone being smaller than she'd expected for someone in William's position, then quickly added that it was the thought that counted. I tried to push down the disappointment creeping in. This was supposed to be my moment of pure joy, and I wasn't going to let anyone dim it. I gushed about how much I loved the ring, how perfect it was, but even as the words left my mouth they felt hollow. Then my mother shifted into planning mode. She announced she'd call my father and siblings to arrange a family dinner for the next night. There were important things to discuss about the engagement, she said. The way she said it made something twist in my gut, but I was still too high on happiness to really process what that meant. After we hung up, I stared at the ring again, trying to recapture that perfect feeling from the night before. But something had shifted. Some small seed of doubt had been planted, and I hated myself for letting it take root. Why did my mother's reaction feel more like a business evaluation than a celebration? And what exactly needed discussing about our engagement?
Hey, this is William. I've been planning this for months. Not just the ring, but the whole thing. The spot by the lake where we had our first real conversation. Not our first date, but that moment 3 weeks in when we both knew this was different. I'd even checked the weather forecast 2 weeks out like some kind of obsessive lunatic. That's how much this mattered to me. When I walked through the door and saw Abigail standing there with the ring box open, my heart sank. Not because I was angry at her, but because that perfect moment I'd been building in my head just evaporated. The surprise was gone. The carefully planned speech I'd been practicing in my car during lunch breaks was useless now. But then I looked at her face. She was crying happy tears, and her smile was so bright it could have powered our entire building. How could I be disappointed when the woman I loved was that happy? We stood there together, and even though it wasn't how I'd planned it, it felt right. I made it clear I'd been planning something special for the actual proposal and needed her to keep this discovery secret, so we could still have our moment. She promised through her tears that she would. I trusted her completely. I should have known better. The next evening, we walked into her family's house for what I thought would be a normal dinner. Maybe a little congratulations, some champagne, her dad shaking my hand and welcoming me to the family. I was nervous, but happy. I'd even worn my good shirt, the blue one Abigail loved on me. Something was off the moment we stepped inside. Her parents and both siblings were dressed up like they were heading to a country club dinner, not having a casual family meal. The dining room table was set with the fancy china I'd only seen during holidays. Everyone was sitting perfectly straight, hands folded like they were conducting a board meeting. The conversation during dinner was weird, stilted. Questions about work, about my salary, about my 5-year plan came at me like bullets. Normal topics, I guess, but the way they fired them at me felt like an interrogation. Abigail seemed oblivious to the tension, chatting away about wedding magazines and venues she'd looked up online during her lunch break. Then came dessert. Her mother brought out this elaborate chocolate cake, and I thought maybe the formal atmosphere was just their way of celebrating. I was wrong. Abigail's father cleared his throat and launched into what felt like a prepared speech. Family traditions and expectations, and how important it was to do things properly filled the air around our table. I nodded along, thinking he was just being paternal, maybe a little old-fashioned but harmless. Then he dropped the bomb. The family had been discussing the engagement, and they had some thoughts about how it should happen. 2 proposals, actually. The first would be private, in their family church, using the ring I'd bought. Nice and intimate, just for us. But the second proposal, the real one in their minds, would be at a big engagement party they wanted to throw. For that one, I need a different ring, a bigger ring, a much more expensive ring. I sat there trying to process what I was hearing. They wanted me to propose twice, with 2 different rings? The second ring needed to be substantial enough to make the right impression on their friends and extended family. Her mother rattled off specific jewelers, specific cuts, specific carat weights that would be appropriate for someone in my position who was serious about their daughter. The numbers they threw around made my head spin. We were talking about a ring that cost more than my car, more than I made in 6 months. They must have seen the shock on my face because they quickly pivoted to offering help with the cost, which I could repay later. I looked at Abigail, waiting for her to shut this down, to tell them we were happy with the ring I'd chosen. But she was nodding along, caught up in the excitement of party planning and guest lists. She didn't see what was really happening here. This wasn't about love or commitment or celebrating our relationship. This was about showing off, about proving something to their social circle. The ring I'd saved for, the one I'd chosen specifically because it reminded me of Abigail's quiet elegance, wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough. Why was I sitting here being told that my love needed upgrading? And how had the woman I wanted to marry become part of a plan that felt designed to humiliate me?
Walking out of that dinner, I was buzzing with excitement. A huge engagement party, with all our friends and family. It sounded like something out of a magazine, like those Pinterest weddings I'd been secretly bookmarking for months. My family wanted to throw us this amazing celebration, and all we had to do was get a slightly bigger ring for the occasion. I didn't understand why William was so quiet on the drive home. He kept his hands gripped tight on the steering wheel, jaw clenched like he was fighting some internal battle. When I chattered about guest lists and venues, he just nodded. I figured he was overwhelmed by all the planning talk. Men get weird about wedding stuff sometimes, right? The ring thing seemed so simple to me. We'd have our private moment with his ring, which I genuinely loved, and then we'd have this spectacular public celebration with a showstopper that would make everyone gasp. 2 rings, 2 moments, twice the romance. What was wrong with that? My mother had even offered to help pay for the second ring with a loan. She pulled me aside while William was in the bathroom and made it sound so reasonable, so generous. Family contributions and investments in our future, she'd framed it. They just wanted the best for me, wanted to make sure I had the fairy tale I deserved. But the more I talked about it over the next few days, the more William withdrew. He'd come home from work with this distant look in his eyes, like he was seeing me differently. When I showed him pictures of rings I'd found online, he'd glance at them and change the subject. When I brought up the party planning timeline, he'd get up and find something else to do. Was I missing something here? This was supposed to be the happiest time of our lives, and he was acting like someone had died. I started to feel defensive about my family's generous offer. They were trying to help us, trying to give us something beautiful, and he was treating it like an insult. I couldn't understand his resistance. My family was excited, had already started making calls to relatives, had visions of this perfect celebration that would be the talk of our social circle for years. The engagement party would be elegant, sophisticated, everything a couple like us deserved. The breaking point came when I cornered him in the kitchen one evening. I'd spent my lunch break looking at venues and was excited to share what I'd found. He listened with this pained expression, then quietly brought up having just one proposal, one ring, one simple moment like we'd originally planned. I stared at him in disbelief. How could he want to disappoint my family like that? They were so invested in this celebration, had already started envisioning the perfect evening. Was he really going to let his pride ruin all of that? That's when it hit me. This was about pride. William was embarrassed that he couldn't afford the kind of ring my family expected, embarrassed that they'd offered to help, embarrassed that his original choice wasn't impressive enough for our social circle. I felt a wave of sympathy mixed with frustration. Why couldn't he see that this wasn't about money or status? I tried to make him understand gently. My family had certain expectations, certain traditions that went back generations. The engagement party was how they celebrated these milestones. The ring was just a prop for one evening, not a reflection of his worth or our relationship. We could still treasure his original ring as our real engagement ring. But the more I talked, the more his face hardened. The more I tried to help him see my family's perspective, the more distant he became. I could see something breaking between us, some fundamental disconnect that I didn't know how to bridge. My frustration grew with each passing day. I'd grown up in this family, knew their values, understood their expectations. Why couldn't he trust that I knew what was best for navigating the situation? Why was he being so stubborn about something that would make everyone happy? The worst part was watching my family's excitement slowly turn to confusion and disappointment. They'd call me with ideas for the party, suggestions for vendors, updates on the guest list they were compiling. I found myself making excuses for William's lack of enthusiasm, covering for his apparent unwillingness to participate. Why couldn't he just trust that I knew my family best? And why was he making me choose between the man I loved and the people who'd raised me?
The fury had been building for days, and I was done pretending this was reasonable. Who the hell did her family think they were? I'd spent 3 years being polite to these people, nodding along to their passive-aggressive comments about my job, my car, my clothes. But this crossed every line I had. 2 rings. 2 proposals, like I was some kind of performing monkey jumping through hoops for their entertainment. The first ring wasn't good enough for their precious daughter, so they'd graciously allow me to upgrade for the real show. The condescension was so thick I could choke on it. I kept thinking about my own family. My dad worked construction for 37 years, came home every night with concrete dust in his hair and pride in his work. My mom stretched every dollar to make sure we had what we needed, never what we wanted, but always what mattered. They raised me to believe that a man's word and his effort were worth more than the price tag on anything he could buy. Abigail's family was demanding I shit on everything I'd been taught about integrity and self-respect. They wanted me to participate in some elaborate charade where my love had to be performed and validated by their social circle. Where the ring I'd saved for, the one I'd chosen specifically because it reminded me of Abigail's quiet beauty, wasn't worthy of their approval. Fuck their approval. And fuck their traditions. I'd had enough of Abigail making excuses for them. Enough of her treating their demands like reasonable requests. She kept trying to frame it as a compromise, as if humiliating me was somehow a middle ground we should both be happy with. She couldn't see that this wasn't about the money or the ring or even the party. This was about them establishing dominance, making it clear that I'd never be good enough for their daughter, that I'd always be the guy they had to tolerate. The breaking point came when she cornered me in the kitchen again, laptop open to some venue website, chattering about catering options and guest lists like this nightmare was actually happening. I'd reached my limit. I closed her laptop and looked her straight in the eye. No more dancing around this. No more being diplomatic. I laid it out for her plain and simple. I wasn't going to participate in their dog and pony show. I wasn't buying a second ring to impress people I didn't respect. I wasn't going to propose twice like some kind of trained seal begging for fish. Either we did this our way, with one ring and one proposal and one moment that belonged to us, or we didn't do it at all. Period. End of discussion. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. She launched into how I was being unreasonable, how I was letting my pride ruin everything, how I didn't understand her family's perspective. Her family's perspective? I understood it perfectly. They thought I wasn't good enough for her, and they were making sure I knew it. But what gutted me was realizing that somewhere along the way, Abigail had started agreeing with them. She was so caught up in their vision of what our engagement should look like that she'd forgotten what it was supposed to mean. She'd chosen their approval over our partnership, their expectations over my dignity. That's when I knew this wasn't going to work. This wasn't about a ring or a party. This was about fundamental values, about who we were when tested. And when push came to shove, Abigail would always choose her family's comfort over standing with me. I couldn't marry someone who wouldn't fight for us when it mattered. I couldn't build a life with someone who'd throw me under the bus the moment her family disapproved. The woman I'd fallen in love with would have shut them down, would have defended the ring I'd chosen, would have stood up for what we had together. But that woman was gone. In her place was someone who cared more about fairy tale parties and family approval than the man she claimed to love. Someone who'd rather see me humiliated than disappoint her precious family. My dad always taught me that respect is earned, not bought. That a man who compromises his principles for acceptance isn't a man at all. I'd watched him stand up to bosses, neighbors, anyone who tried to make him feel small. He never backed down when his values were on the line. I wasn't about to start now. Why should I fight for someone who wouldn't fight for me? And how had I been stupid enough to think love was enough when respect was missing?
When William gave me that ultimatum, I felt my world tilting. How could he be so selfish? My family was offering to help us throw the most beautiful engagement party anyone had ever seen, and he was acting like it was some kind of personal attack. The pressure from home was relentless. My mother contacted me every single day, checking on progress with the ring, shopping, and party planning. She'd already put deposits down on venues, started ordering flowers, sent save the dates to half our extended family. Everyone was so excited for us. My siblings kept texting me pictures of engagement rings they'd found online, bigger and more impressive than what William had bought. They'd add little comments about how I deserved the best, how this was my moment to shine. My sister even found the exact ring my family had suggested. But William just kept refusing. Every conversation ended the same way, with him getting angrier and more unreasonable. He'd rant about respect and dignity, and how my family was trying to control us. He couldn't see that they just wanted what was best for me. The final confrontation happened on a Thursday night. I'd found the perfect photographer for the engagement party, and was excited to share the portfolio with William. But the moment I opened my laptop, he slammed it shut and started it on me again. He went off like I'd never seen before. No more quiet discussions. He was furious, shouting about how my family could go fuck themselves and their traditions. How he wasn't going to dance like a trained monkey for people who thought they were better than him. How he'd rather burn the ring than buy a second one to impress my relatives. I was shocked by his language, by the pure rage coming out of him. This wasn't the man I'd fallen in love with. This was someone ugly and mean, someone who would rather destroy our relationship than compromise on anything. That's when I snapped. I started shouting back, telling him he was being cruel and unreasonable. That if he really loved me, he'd want to give me everything I dreamed of. That his refusal to even consider my family's suggestions showed he didn't care about my happiness at all. I was sobbing by then, telling him that maybe my family was right about him. The look on his face when I finished was something I'll never forget. Pure disgust. Like he was seeing me for the first time and hating what he found. He didn't yell back. He just stared at me for a long moment, then walked over to the coffee table where the ring box sat. He picked it up, snapped it shut, and put it in his pocket. The ring was never mine to begin with, he declared, and now it never would be. The relationship was over. I could have my family's approval and their fancy party, but I couldn't have him or his ring. Then came the words that still echo in my head. I needed to pack my things and get out. This was his apartment, and he was done with me. I stood there in shock, unable to process what was happening. He meant it. I started gathering my clothes, my makeup, my books, everything I'd brought into our shared life. He watched me the entire time, arms crossed, face stone cold. I contacted my mother immediately, sobbing about what had happened. She came right over to help me finish packing, and they held me while I cried. They kept telling me I dodged a bullet, that a man who wouldn't fight for me wasn't worth keeping. But sitting in my childhood bedroom that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd lost something irreplaceable. The simple ring I'd never see again suddenly seemed perfect in a way I'd forgotten. Had I really chosen correctly? And why did winning feel so much like losing?